Good morning, Bill.
Today we're talking about bailouts. Have you had a bailout?
No, not recently. I'm always welcome.
Well, there's some trucker up in the Northeast that has got a winning lottery ticket for $330 million. He might be able to help with the bailout.
That'd be nice.
And so won the Powerball.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the folks in Cyprus have won the Powerball.
No, they're in pretty bad shape right now. It's going to be, it's what's sad is that the people in Cyprus, the working people, are going to have to suffer now for about probably 10 years because to get Cyprus out of this mess.
Well, let's talk about, there's a proposed rescue on the table this morning. And why is that, by the way, just out of curiosity for our listeners out there, let's talk about why that is important to all of us in the United States.
Well,
because it seems so far away.
Yeah, the thing is that right now there are very few restrictions on currency transfer between countries. That wasn't always the case prior to World War II or even right after World War II.
EU countries or all countries?
All countries. There were a lot of restrictions on
how much
money transfer from one country to another, but increasingly after, well, really starting in the 50s, there were reduction and reducing the constraints on that so that there was money transfer going more and more between countries. And what's happened is that there has been a lot of big money out there, some of it not legitimate, but big money that then follows where they can get the best benefit from that money, right?
Safe havens
And so Cyprus, this is just the most recent of a whole series of these countries that have done this, have essentially opened the doors and say, hey, we don't, we know nothing, we don't see nothing, hear nothing. You can bring that money in.
No evil and speak no evil.
Right, you bring that money to us and we'll pay you big returns on that money. And so the money that came into Cyprus,
they attracted a lot of money.
They did.
A lot of capital.
Huge amount. And in fact, they had assets, the bank assets were approximately 8 times the country's GDP.
Wow.
It was really a huge amount of money that came in, and in fact, what was happening, they were doing these round trips, particularly from Russia. They would take that money out of these big companies, put it over into Cyprus, and then have Cyprus put it back into the country.
That's a way to launder it.
Laundering it, right? And it actually turned out that Cyprus was the largest foreign investor in Russia. Now that's from an economy that's the size of Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Well, that just goes to show you the power of financial assets.
Oh yeah.
and so, well, let's talk about the practical implication of that. They were in the EU.
Right.
I think the smallest member of the EU.
They're in the EU, and the European Union is struggling right now. I mean, they've been in a bad state now for going on about 10 years.
Especially just a loose federation.
Right. Yeah. The problem is that they joined together to have a common currency. Now, the way these types of problems would normally be fixed is that you would have your own currency and you would devalue your currency and then
be no big deal.
Right, no big deal. But now when they're having a common currency,
those
they're
economies
running
are
all
linked.
these problems. Yeah, and this is just the most recent one. They've had Iceland, Ireland, Greece, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and now Cyprus. That have all run into this same problem. And Cyprus has had a big boom in real estate. Everything is overvalued in there. They've had all this money flowing in, and now they're going to pay the piper.
Well, let's talk about that haircut. Well, first we have a bailout deal on the table by the IMF and by the European Union and some other players.
Right, about $13 billion right now. Okay, and
it's going to allow them to keep their banks open.
Right.
Or reopen.
Reopen. They've been closed since the 16th, so almost 10 days. And what that's going to do is, it's not all formalized yet, but right now they're saying that the people who have less than $100,000 in their savings account,
about 129,000 euros, I think.
Right? Yeah, something like that.
So it's
roughly. I don't know what exactly, but or maybe it's 100,000 euros, $129,000. I'm not sure, but in any case, about that amount, they're going to be able to get all their money. But above that, they're going to take a huge haircut.
The forecasts are for a 40% haircut.
Yeah, a big haircut. Now, to get back to your question, if you had money in Cyprus because you were protecting it from taxes and other regulations,
you have a loss of principal. You have a loss of principal. I mean, there's not going to be return on principal. There's going to be a loss of principal.
Exactly. So you might not be happy with that, and so you might be looking to put it somewhere a little safer. Okay. Well,
maybe in Central Europe, or maybe in the U.S.
In the U.S., yes. I mean, always the U.S. is the
it's reserve currency.
Yeah, exactly. And so U.S. has its own currency. It's a very strong currency, and so it's perceived to be very safe, so that people put it in there.
Treasury bonds bid up. Treasury notes bid up. As a result, mortgage rates down.
Right. But here's the other issue, and one of the things that happened in our last real estate boom is that there was a lot of that money being invested in real estate in the U.S., and that's one of the things that inflated the real estate prices. So we may see a big return to that, because real estate prices are going up.
I know some investors that are ready. You know the realtor's prayer.
Oh, yeah.
The realtor's prayer: Dear God, please let there be one more boom. I promise not to throw it away this time.
Well, that's true. I mean, and what's always amazing to me is that you get into this boom and everybody seems to be blind to what's going on.
Well, they get so engrossed in what's happening day to day, they miss the big picture. You've got some evidence of that.
Well, there was an article this morning in the
Your favorite paper,
Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about a recent academic study by a couple of folks, one at Penn, I forget where the other one was, and what they did was they went back to the American Securitization Forum, which met in Las Vegas, it always meets in Las Vegas, back in 2006.
It's a great meeting.
Yeah, and they looked at all the attendees. There were about 1,200 attendees, okay, and then they got rid of the people who were not really involved in securitization and identified the people who actually did securitizations. And then they matched them with a control group of other people that's similar income and, but not so much in the real estate securitization thing. And then they went actually and looked at all the legal papers and said, okay, what did these people that were in securitization actually do during that boom?
You'd think they'd have the best knowledge.
They have the best knowledge, and if they were aware that there was a bubble.
For our listeners out there, you would think they'd have insider knowledge, but insider trading is permitted in real estate. It's not a security as defined by the securities laws.
And so they looked at what they actually did, and they were all increasing their homes, big and bigger.
So they doubled out on their own homes.
Absolutely, they were just going into it.
Fantastic.
They didn't seem to perceive that there was a bubble that was likely to crash.
That money was sweet and fast and flowing.
And so, and you could say, well, that's because they were making so much money on their bonuses and everything.
But they were levered up too. They were levered up.
They were levered up bad, and when the crash hit, they were selling their homes and getting out of those homes faster than the control group. So, or trying to anyway. And so, so they seem to be totally unaware of what's, that bubble.
It sounds like what went on in Cyprus. They watched it happen in Cyprus.
Exactly. I mean, when times are good, you just go with the flow, evidently.
Who wants to take the punch away?
Right, and they're in bad shape. So people are gonna hurt, and this is, and it's one of the things that may come out of this is that there may be some new push to control the flow of money between countries.
That would probably not be good for trading.
It's not good for trading. I mean, the whole reason that they loosened those controls was to increase the opportunities people, make it better for business. But the result has been a whole series of bad occurrences. I mean, going back to the 80s, down in South America, you had Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico that had problems. going up through the 90s, you had the
US,
Malaysia,
the U.S.
U.S. Well, more recently U.S. Yeah.
But we had problems in the U.S. in the 80s, the late 80s and
right,
early 90s.
exactly. Yeah, with the savings and loan.
Right.
And then more recently, I mean, then they had the problems in Asia. You know, the Malaysia, Thailand, Korea. And then more recently now over in Europe with all of those countries.
Well,
So-
if we don't say bye, we're going to have problems. So this is FNC's Morning View. I'm Bill Rayburn with Bob Dorsey. You all have a fantastic week.